Hello everyone, it's Riffraff Hornhelm and I'm back again with another presentation from the Dwarven Vault, and today we have another monster review. We're still sticking with the theme of primarily subterranean monsters, entry level to medium level, as first described in the Monster Manual for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, which of course, as we all know, turns 50 years old this year. So, what are we going to talk about today? We've gone through quite a number of the subterranean entry-level creatures. Well, there's one important one that we've missed up to this point, and it's so ubiquitous that we really don't think about it. And that's the orc. The plain and simple orc. Now, from a dwarvish perspective, orcs are evil, nasty creatures that I cheerfully kill, except when they're busy fighting elves. Then I sit back with popcorn and a beer. But orcs are nasty, brown, green, shorter than human-sized creatures, slightly shorter at least, with very exaggerated and distorted facial features and body features, and let's face it, they pretty much hate all living things. What it says in the book. Now that certainly does open it up for the orcs. You hate everything. Now they especially hate elves, so that's the one endearing quality to me that an orc has. Like I said, if I see elves around, I'm just gonna hang back and let the orcs and the elves duke it out. If they want to throw hands, that's up to them. And like I said, if I have a campfire there, I'll make some popcorn, take out a keg of beer or some nice dwarven whiskey, and sit and watch and call out pointers to the orcs, you know, anything to help a friend in need under those circumstances. Pretty cool stuff, right? I think so. Now, come on. There's all kinds of things that you can do with orcs if you're a DM. They fill a lot of holes. And you can put them in amazing numbers. Anything from a small raiding party or war party to a village or a army. And they're really easy to deal with. Let's face it, they're one hit dice creature. And even a real strong orc chieftain is under 20 hit points. So they're not that tough. They are kind of the ever-present monster that everyone who has played the game has pretty much killed in job lots since they started the game. How many orcs have you killed? People lose track. I understand that. I mean, in one battle I can lose track of that, but still, that shows how much disrespect they get in general terms from the parties that are out adventuring. They're just too easy. So when you talk about orcs, you really need to break it into two things. It's how many. Okay? If you're a DM and you're going to throw it in as an encounter for your party, it has to be proportionate to the number of players who are in the party if you want them to get through it. Now, I've had some fun with orcs. Orcs can kill parties, especially if you have a big enough group of them. But most of the time, I want it to be somewhat proportionate. I don't see the orcs as being a boss unless that's part of the main plot thread for said dungeon or said adventure. Most of the time, they're just something to keep everybody's muscle memory going and keep their weapons in good form. You know, it's all stuff that is important to the fun of the party. But if you're a player, it also makes a difference. If you run into a small group of orcs as a player, slicey dicey, it's all over in a couple of minutes. Nothing wrong with that. If you run into a large warband and there's a party of, say, 6 of you and there's 40 of the orcs, well, that makes things a little more interesting. Generally speaking, though, you'd still win. So when I talk to the fellow HornhelmClan members, people who do DMing and so forth, and say, orcs. Well, everybody says, yeah, it's got to have them. At some point, got to have some orcs somewhere. And when asked about them, they kind of looked at them kind of like popcorn. You can throw lots of them in there and they just get eaten up. They weren't looked at as being a very effective creature, but they were a great creature for carrying the plot forward and creating drama and tension and so forth and so on. So when you speak to the DMs, what do they say of Orc? A 1. Almost universally, a 1. Extraordinarily, maybe a 2 in terms of difficulty. Now, asking characters about it, yeah, they say the same thing. A 1 or a 2 at the very best, and that's high-level orcs. They're not difficult. They do add some fun into the dungeon. They can also be a great plot device for carrying stories from one dungeon to another, or from one person to another, contact to another, place to another within a dungeon. They provide some easy continuity that allows the players to kick the snot out of something and feel good about it. Now, from a player standpoint, that's exactly it. They like kicking orc butt. Orcs are nasty, they're sarcastic, they're fun to play as NPCs, and you can use them to taunt your players in all kinds of fun ways. And it makes for a nice, fun, easy encounter. But nobody would call these difficult. Really, they're slightly more difficult than things like skeletons and zombies, but only slightly, and it's because they talk. Now, those things don't make it very much different for the actual player. They're easy to get through, though obviously you can't use a cleric to turn them. But there is one other aspect to orcs that, of course, needs to be considered, and it's one that's kind of blown out of all proportion as the game Dungeons & Dragons has advanced. Orcs have become, not orcs, but half-orcs and orcs have become more mainstream player characters within the game. Now, I'm not here to talk about that part of it in terms of what I like and dislike, but from the original game, and remember the focus is on the original AD&D here, orcs were evil characters. Having run many games back in the day, people were exploring limits of the game at that time, and half-orcs were often a popular way of trying to explore the limits of the game. Within the context of early AD&D, it really didn't work that well. And part of the reason for it is that, frankly, orcs are evil. They hate all living things. Even as a half-orc, you're not the nicest person. There might be a one-off type of trope where somebody goes off and becomes a good orc or something, but that was way, 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 way rare. Because of that, it made it very difficult to incorporate characters that were half-orcs, because as soon as you went into a town or any place where there are other living people around, and elves, elves, that was almost like a paladin seeing something evil. Got to go for it right away. There's an orc there. Kill it. So half-orcs and orcs as independent player characters, easy through the first 10 plus years of the game, were not considered a good option. They were considered, really, if you had a player character who wanted to do that, you really started to question whether or not they were seriously involved in the game. Because you knew that this would just be constant disruption. And as a DM, you want to do what your players do up to a point. Somebody who's in there to constantly be a disruption is detrimental to what goes on for the rest of the party. So you have to be a little bit careful when you interpret the orc today versus the way it was back in the day, back in 1978 when the Monster Manual first came out. And prior to that, life-hating, evil creatures. They've changed quite a bit in the current game, and the view of orcs is quite a bit different now, but this is the way it was in the early days of AD&D. Having a strong preference for a game when I started playing that had clear definitions between good and evil, I like this interpretation. It doesn't mean I don't understand or can work with the current day interpretation for it. But I don't think it makes the game better by changing it this way. That's just a personal opinion. In any case, I hope you found this interesting about orcs and half orcs. They certainly bring a lot to the game in the current 5e version, and they brought a lot to the game in the old AD&D version. They're just very different versions. So if you liked what we talked about today, please, by all means, give us a thumbs up. Consider subscribing. By all means, come back and see us again soon. And remember, dwarves rock!